Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. As always, I cannot wait to introduce our guest to you today. Before I do, I want to thank some people that we always thank. We want to thank brassandwinds.com. The Mighty Quinn Brass and Winds are where we at the Willow School go when we're looking for woodwind or brass instruments, and we think you ought to check them out first. www.brassandwinds.com. You're watching The Truth About Music. I want to help you discover, come back, there you are. I want to help you discover the truth about music. And we do it through this quest of mine where I interview interesting people and you get to find out more about them and what they do. And in that vein, I'm going to tell you a story. Some of you, hopefully all of you, have checked out our interview with Mr. Matt Rawlings. That was a wonderful surprise, that interview. It came out wonderfully. But in my research for Matt Rawlings, I discovered someone else had beaten me to him, and his name was Paul Leslie. And I said, well, that's interesting. Someone else wants to interview Matt Rawlings. That's great. So I watched the interview, and I was very taken by his interview style and by him. And I thought, why don't I contact him and see what we might do? So we've come to this: interviewers interviewing interviewers. And hi, Paul. Let me tell them who you are. Paul Leslie has interviewed more than 800 people during his career of writing and hosting radio and online programming. Currently, the show is a podcast available on iTunes, Stitcher, and other platforms. Among the guests Paul has interviewed are Arlo Guthrie, Lyle Lovett, J.D. Souther, Dick Cavett, Willie Nelson, Bruce Hornsby, Jimmy Webb twice, Don McLean, and that's just the beginning. They go on and on and on. Paul Leslie, thank you for coming on my show.
Thank you, Adam Cole, and thank you for that very, very kind introduction. And also the names you listed are some of my absolute favorites. So
yeah, mine too. Those are the ones who I would like to talk to especially. Well, I wanted to ask you a question that you've asked so many of your guests. You often will ask them who they are, and it's an interesting question. So who is Paul Leslie?
it's not so easy when it's pointed at me. Well, I like to think I'm just a very humble guy. I feel very, very lucky. And in fact, I feel luckier with every single passing day. I don't know what's gotten into me over like the last year, but my gratitude, it really, really runs over. And I'm clearly somebody who really, really loves music. I like talking about music. I love songs. And to me, songwriters are very, very special people. They're like heroes to me. And I'm just a guy who, in my humble way, I am presenting what I love out there into the world. And it's an excuse, frankly, it's an excuse to connect with people. And so I've been hosting this show, as you said, for 19 years now. I'm a guy who doesn't take anything for granted, and I enjoy the simplest things. If you wanted to know who I am in a nutshell, things like, I mean, it could be as simple as cutting grass, which I haven't done in a while, but playing with my little dog. And one of my absolute pleasures, which you have kindly given me the opportunity, it's just having conversations with people. And I can tell, especially from your comments on the channel, that you and I have a lot in common. So that's my off the cuff, who is Paul Leslie.
Yeah, I quite agree. And it's one of the reasons I was really dying to talk to you. I felt like you had a very similar attitude towards interviews as me, and I really like that. I'm very curious to know how you find your guests.
I find my guests when something creates an emotional fascination or an emotional reaction that makes me think, I wonder what that person is like. So Jimmy Webb, for example, I think he's one of the best songwriters that America has ever had. And I can remember years ago, I was looking at an Art Garfunkel album, and all the songs had Jimmy Webb in parentheses. And I thought, what would it be like to meet or be able to talk to the guy who could write a song like that? And, you know, now all these interviews later, sometimes I even look at the list and I'm really grateful, but also it does, I'll admit, it does blow me away sometimes. There was a time I was walking in Atlantic Station in Atlanta, and there was 5 songs that were playing over the outside sound system. And it kind of blew me away because I was thinking, man, these songs are great. They're some of the greatest songs ever. And I realized, wow, and I've interviewed all 5 of them. And it's a thrill, it's a kick. So when something has stirred me and I think, wow, that's amazing that this person came up with that idea, then I think I would like to talk to them, and I do whatever I can to make that happen.
Clearly you enjoy it. It's there's nothing contrived about your conversations with these people at all. You manage to maintain a respectful distance to give them room to talk, but it's not a clinical distance, and so they talk to you very nicely. What was it like? Were you surprised when you talked to Jimmy Webb, or was it about what you expect?
You know, it kind of surprised me in some ways, because to me, I think here's this artistic giant, and the first interview, there's just a little backstory there. I was using a radio station recording their studio for it. I didn't have a landline at that point. And I found, so I didn't, I didn't wanted to make it sound as good as possible. My pickup truck got stuck in the mud, and I was terrified. I thought, this is my chance to interview Jimmy Webb, and I blew it. It's over.
That's my nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, now I have to call Jimmy Webb, and I have to tell him this story about my truck was stuck in the mud.
Well, he'll write a song though, right?
In my dreams, yeah. But then I call him, and I say, hey, it's Paul Leslie. We have an interview scheduled. And he said, I wish we could do it another time. Because he said, you hear this frog in my throat. And I just felt this relief, like, oh my goodness, like, thank you, God.
Right.
And I said, oh no, that's no problem. Yeah, would love to talk to you. You said tomorrow? That works for me. And so Jimmy Webb is just such a very humble guy. Again, I got such a thrill, the introduction of the second interview saying America's songwriter, because that's a title that his marketing department or whatever came up for him, but it's just spot on. He's America's songwriter.
Yeah. You've also interviewed a lot of people who I've never heard of. I mean, as many famous people as you've interviewed, there are 10 of those not so famous, or people that
Right.
some people know. Clearly these people are important people, but not necessarily famous. And I mean, do you know about all these people, or do you just kind of find them by accident sometimes, or are you just that knowledgeable?
I
I'll
am
test your
somebody.
modesty here.
I'm somebody who, for whatever reason, the names in the parentheses are really important to me. In fact, it's not whatever reason. My mom, who is a very musical lady, she would know certain names. So I can remember, I mean, I was just a little guy, and she floated the name Marty Panzer, which not everybody would know the name Marty Panzer. This great lyricist, everybody would know a lot of those songs. And to me, I would think, and I really feel this way, this isn't some kind of a, I don't know, stunt. To me, I look at Marty Panzer as big of a star as Barry Manilow, who he wrote so many songs with. That's just how I'm kind of, wired. I don't know if I'm knowledgeable, and I guess I do have to try to be a little humble here, but there are times, like the other day, my wife and I, we were driving around, and a friend of ours, Margie, was in the car with us, and there were all of these old crooners, and I knew but just by the first couple seconds of their voice, somebody said, "Is that Frank Sinatra?" I said, "No, that's not Frank Sinatra. That's Andy Williams." And I think it's just because I listen to a lot of music, and it is something that I'm so enamored with is the best word. And so because I'm so interested in it, it's not enough for me to try to interview Willie Nelson. I got to find out, who is this Matt Rawlings guy?
Yeah.
Like you, I guess we're kind of out of the same school, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Cut from the same cloth.
Yeah, that's the phrase.
Yeah. Well, you brought up your mom, so this is a great segue into you as a child. Some people, I think I always kind of wanted to do interviews. I always imagined myself being interviewed, interviewing other people. I didn't
Mhm.
make it a reality until just a few years ago. But did you? I mean, were you always thinking about being an interviewer from the time you were just a little lad?
Not really, no. But there was, I think, sometimes you wonder if if this certain thing hadn't happened, would you be doing what you were doing? So it wasn't long ago that I was thinking about, where did this whole communication thing start? And when I was in the first grade, I created this. It was supposed to be an article, I think, but it was just like a black and white drawing. And what I did was just so shameless. I mean, here I am in the first grade, and I thought, I want to get in the newspaper. So my piece is going to be about the newspaper itself. So I created this, black and white drawing / copy, and it was about the newspaper, about how much I loved it. I said, you can find out the temperature, you can find out, you know, I said, you can even find out when the president is coming back from Florida, because the president at that time had apparently gone to Florida, and that was some kind of a news story. So when the editors of the newspaper were selecting, going through what they were going to publish, I heard that they said that when they saw mine, they had no doubt. They said, this one goes in. So there may be as shameless as I am. But
Yeah. You understand how the media works, and you did even then.
maybe I did on some level,
Yeah.
but it was a thrill for me. I mean, I can still kind of remember it, being 7 years old and having been published. And so, I never thought that I would really be interviewing people, but now, some 900 later, I guess that label.
You probably have, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a variety of places, from let's see, I'll name them real quick.
Okay.
I was technically born in Michigan. I've lived in Florida, Georgia, New Jersey, and the Philippine Islands. So that
Was that all when you were a child, or is that over the course of your life?
that was my childhood.
Wow.
And
Okay.
now I'm in South Carolina.
Got it.
And I was for a long time in Atlanta.
Mhm.
So, that would be where I would say feels the most like home to me.
I can't believe we didn't run into each other.
I can't either.
There's only a few million people. I don't know.
Right.
Wow. Well, so did you? I assume you went to college, but you might not have. Did you go to college? Did you get a radio degree or something like that?
I did go to college. Yes, I went to Gainesville College up in Gainesville, Georgia,
Oh.
and I got an associate's degree. And then I went to the University of Georgia in Athens, and there it was not broadcasting. There, the associate's degree was in business, and then I studied English, which that's the degree that you get, I guess, if you don't have no idea what you're going to do.
That was my degree. I'm an English major.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was there was no broadcasting. I wish I had studied broadcasting, though.
Why?
Well,
you
because
made it. What are you talking about?
yeah, I mean, I think that there was something then that I did know that that was really what I was the most interested in. There was this little voice that was telling me, yeah, but if you study this at the university, it won't be as much fun because it's such a thrill to do it.
Yeah.
And it'll just be, that passion and that fire that you feel, it's not going to be the same. And if I was going to study something, why wouldn't it have been communications or broadcasting or something like that?
But did you answer your question just now because you had a sense that studying it would take the fire out, which happens all the time?
Right. Yeah. And, it's one of those things. I wonder if I had gone and gotten a degree in broadcasting or whatever, if I would have gotten a job at a newspaper or a magazine or something and would have hated it
Yeah.
and and wouldn't have been able to do it my way,
Right.
so to speak. Would I have kept at it?
Well, now, how did you get to do it your way? Did you work at the radio station and at UGA?
No, I never did.
Wow.
I tried actually. I I'm trying to remember what happened exactly. I was trying to use their studio because I had an interview with Jeff Bridges.
Yeah.
And again, I was up against this not having lots of money and not having lots of technology. And so I tried to use their studio, but I did it in a very like sheepish way, like where I wasn't asking them very directly. And so I took that like, oh, they don't want me over there. So, again, I'm just going to go off and do it my way. But if you're asking how I got into radio, that was from, of all people, which I've never met him, but Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah.
Yeah, in
It's on my list of
2000.
questions. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Radio Margaritaville, which at that time it was just an online station, and now it's online and Sirius satellite radio.
Yeah. Yeah. This Radio Margaritaville was the first station to make space for you. And you've interviewed all these people and you've expressed your admiration for Jimmy Buffett many times. Why haven't you gotten to talk to him?
Well, Jimmy Buffett is somebody who there's certain singer-songwriters that have this mystique about them. And he definitely has one, and he uses that to his advantage. Of course, I would love to interview Jimmy Buffett, but it's just never happened. I mean, know that there are people in his world that have really, really wanted that to happen. And I've thought about it because now this fall it'll be 20 years from that first broadcast on his station. It would be really, really cool to get him finally. But there's also this thing where I don't know, maybe this is just because I am a glass half full kind of guy. Even if I don't get him, to me that's almost like adds to the story too. I mean, I'm happy either way. That's really what it is all about. But I know that Jimmy, I have heard some things that he has said that have been very nice about my show, and that knocks me out. I mean, so I'm happy either way.
Yeah, that's nice. So I'm confused now. You were going to interview Jeff Bridges back in your college years. Was he your first interview? How in the world?
Well, that was back when I was still on Radio Margaritaville.
Oh, okay.
And I just had this feeling. He was the first so-called celebrity that I interviewed.
Yeah.
And it was a great one to start on because he's such a nice guy. He's very, very sweet. Almost any time that I've emailed him or, reached out to him, he almost always has written me back. And that's not the case with most celebrities or even people who think they're celebrities.
Yeah.
But I had this idea because one of the things about Jimmy Buffett that's kind of interesting is he's like connected to everybody in music. You pretty much name somebody and there's some kind of, he's just done so much. So Jeff Bridges has a really big Jimmy Buffett connection. And so I had this idea. I thought, I'm going to interview Jeff Bridges. And I don't know why, but I just thought, I think he'll go for it. And at that point, I had no resume. There was no name that I could say, you know, these are some of the people that I've interviewed. I had nothing, but he's such a nice guy. And because I think he could tell I genuinely liked his album, he came out with this album years ago, and he's done a few since then, but
Yeah.
really good work. And I remember his assistant saying, Jeff thinks it's cool that you like the music and that you're playing it. And
Mhm.
so it was like 2 months later, kind of surreal in some ways. Uh, there I was talking to Jeff Bridges.
I think it's important too to point out that maybe one of the things that makes your interviews so wonderful and successful is that you actually like the music and the people that you're talking to. You're not just hired to interview this person, you want to talk to them and you like what they've done.
I would say that that is 100% accurate. I've never interviewed someone that didn't do something or say something that stirred me in some way. And I think this may be something I shouldn't say, but one of the surest signs that it ends up I probably don't want to talk to that person is when a publicist reaches out to me and says, "We want you to interview this person," because a lot of times it's forced.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I really want to talk to the person. And I think one of the best compliments I got, I'm trying to remember who this was that said this, but this guy, he emailed me and he said, whenever I listen to one of your interviews, it doesn't sound like an interview, really. It just sounds like you're this guy who happened to somehow you bumped into fill in the blank. So there's almost like you could look at that two ways. You could say that's a compliment. You could also say, it's almost like I come across like an amateur in some ways,
Hmm.
which I wouldn't have any problem with that. I really wouldn't.
Hmm. Not an amateur so much as unaffected. Um, Maybe one would be surprised that you have been so successful because you are so unaffected. You would expect a successful interviewer to be like, "Hello there, hi, hey, how's it going?" And you're just a person talking to a person, and that's my opinion.
Yeah, I'll take that. Yeah, one of my favorite words is egalitarian.
Yeah, I like that.
I like people when I meet people and I find out that they have that certain thing. Like when I find out, like when I've gone onto somebody's tour bus, for example, and there's no difference between the artist and, for example, one of the roadies or the bus driver,
Yeah,
when it's almost like a family thing.
yeah.
That I like.
Like
I
what
really
Paula
like.
Cole said about Peter Gabriel.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
right.
And she's somebody like I couldn't believe Paula Cole is such a talented woman. And here she is, and she was nervous. And you could tell when we were sitting down together that she was nervous. Now that was my first on-camera interview was Paula Cole.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, you're nervous around me? I'm this kid in a cheap sports coat. But yeah,
Yeah, well, let's talk about that interview because it was your most. I mean, it's funny to talk to an interviewer about their greatest hit, but you actually have one. Paula Cole, first interview, she's talked to you 4 or 5 times, I think. That first interview
yeah.
was your most popular and remains your most popular. Why do you suppose that is?
Maybe maybe it maybe it is the most popular because it was so exciting and so I was kind of like just a I didn't know what I was doing, you know. Um that might be but also the guy who edited it, a guy named Jason Friend, he did such a phenomenal job editing it. It's so
Yeah.
well edited. I do the editing of them now, and they're not greatly edited or anything, but I have to give him credit. that there was a little team there. This guy, Jason Friend, another guy named Nathaniel Highsong, and then a guy, Daniel Buckner, who set it up, who used to do some of the announcing on the show. And everybody was just in one common mission. We're here to interview this international recording artist, Paula Cole. But I should make one little note there. You said it's the greatest hit. It's the greatest hit on YouTube, but
Oh.
the greatest, the most downloaded interview on the audio side of it is Delaney Buffett, who happens to be Jimmy Buffett's daughter.
Oh,
That
okay.
was a huge show.
Wow. I never even heard of Delaney Buffett. Sorry, Mr. Buffett.
She's a really, really nice lady,
Yeah.
very talented filmmaker, very, very humble. And I just had a lot of people who reached out to me. Uh, in some ways, I'm surprised that that interview did so good, just because she's not really, at least I don't think she's trying to be famous or anything. But there was just something about it. There was this pattern where I felt like we kind of understood each other. I understood her passion for filmmaking. She respected, hey, this guy, he's trying to get the best interview possible. And so that's why I think that one did so well.
Yeah.
That one did better. You know, she's a filmmaker. Delaney got far more downloads than Woody Allen got. So,
Wow. That's interesting. That's
yeah, yeah,
very interesting.
yeah, it is.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you know, being that you're an interviewer yourself, sometimes it feels like there's no rhyme or reason to what people connect with.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
mysterious algorithm that's out there. Yeah.
well said. Yeah,
Well, I want to backtrack just to Paula Cole for just a minute.
sure.
First of all, I'm really glad you mentioned the editing. I do edit my own videos, and I take great care in doing it, and I understand the value of that. And I agree that good editing really can turn a good interview into a great interview, but it
Right.
can't turn a bad interview into a good interview. And there are reasons I think that it's a really good interview. And I'd like to talk to you about what those are from my perspective and maybe get your reaction, if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm curious.
And I mentioned them in the comments because I left a comment. Um, what struck me now, Paula Cole, and I'm kind of new to Paula Cole. I've known about her for a long time. We share a last name, but
Right.
we're no relation. Sorry. uh, I'm only recently getting to watch her perform, and she's so vulnerable when she performs. For instance, I watched her do "Don't Give Up" with Peter Gabriel, and
Oh,
man,
yeah.
I mean, it's just scary. You just feel like you want to just tell her it's going to be okay because she's just so into it, and she makes herself so vulnerable. I can imagine sitting across from you. And by the way, you did not appear amateur to me at all. You seemed really on. I thought
Hmm.
you seemed very experienced to me, not at all amateurish. She, I don't know that she was intimidated or anything, but clearly that vulnerability was still there for her in the
Hmm.
interview. She did not put up a wall. I'm being
Hmm.
interviewed. She went ahead and she was nervous. And then in the course of 15 minutes, as you're talking to her, she literally transforms in front of us and begins.
Hmm.
You can see a different person, almost a relief, come across her face. And she goes from this frightened vulnerability to this, I really want to tell you things.
Hmm.
It was very exciting.
Well, I can tell you, I did notice that too. I love it when that happens. And I do have a way of making people relax. I have noticed that there have been a lot of times, even aside from interviewing, where I've experienced people who are mad, or I've experienced people who are really, really stressed out. And I just usually know what to say and what to do to get somebody to, you know, relax or feel better. I don't always succeed at that, but there have been times I've put out some kind of a fire, so to speak. But I appreciate you saying that, and it is true. I can, and my memory of that, I remember her relaxing and smiling a lot more in
Yeah.
a very genuine way where you smile with your eyes.
Yes. And no doubt her fans were delighted to, like they're already super close to her in her
Mhm.
performances, they feel like they're kind of inside her skin. But to have her relax in front of them must have been like a great relief.
Yeah, a lot of the comments from Paula Cole fans, they really blew me away. And I did have a lot of people, there was one comment, it was from years and years ago. I still remember it. And somebody said that we were like two souls who somehow kind of somehow we kind of encountered one another.
Yeah.
I know she would probably never recognize me if we crossed paths on the street or something,
Yeah.
but I would feel totally comfortable in just like, oh, because I know she would remember me if I started to say, hey, this was in 2000, whatever that was. And she would remember, I
She talked
think.
to you 4 or 5 times. She's the most interviewed. Isn't she the number one, like, who's interviewed with you most?
I think I've interviewed her 3 times,
Just
if I
3?
remember.
I thought it was 4.
Just
Okay.
maybe it is 4, but I think it was 3. The most recurring guests have been Peter Mayer, who is a phenomenal singer-songwriter. I mean, he's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
Peter Mayer has been on the most. He feels like he's a part of my somehow extended family. And then there's a songwriter who is up in Nashville, John Goodwin. And I
Okay.
think maybe Peter and John Goodwin are tied. Yeah.
At what?
At the most number of appearances.
What's the number? That's what I'm asking. What's the score?
Let me count Peter Mayer real quick. There was the first one, that was an unplugged show. Then the second one, still in one piece. We did a Beatles episode. He loves the Beatles. We did a religious episode. We did one just recently in his home. And then we did one with his son. His son, Brendan Mayer, is another great artist. So that was like, I don't know, you maybe would count that as 6.
Yeah.
And then there was another one. I did an interview with this guy named Roger Guth, and Peter Mayer, who has known him forever, kind of like sat in on that interview. So like 6.5 or 7, depending on how you want to count it. Peter has been on a lot.
Yeah, that's neat.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was neat too when yeah, I watched your interview with Matt Rawlings and you managed to get an insider baseball question from Lyle Lovett that took Matt Rawlings by surprise, and he
It
had to
did.
explain the inside joke. That was brilliant. That was wonderful.
Yeah, I can thank Lyle Lovett for that. One of the things about me is I'm very, very sneaky.
I'm gonna watch out.
Yes, sir.